Hey guys, Bidoof here, and today I'm back with another episode of Road to Ranked where I climb the online series 12 ladder and provide live commentary as I go. Today we're trying out a really unique Ho-Oh team, the highest ranking Ho-Oh team from the Japanese National Championships, which took place this past weekend. This was built and piloted by a player called Yuto Nishikawa, who finished 23rd at Japanese Nationals with this team, and as a result has qualified for day one of the World Championships this upcoming summer. So I linked their Twitter down in the description below. Huge congratulations to them for making it to Worlds, and especially for making top 32 with what I think is a really cool team. As always, I'll do a quick breakdown of the team, but if you want to just skip to the battles, check out the timestamps linked in the description below. Thank you so much as always for watching. If you enjoy, please show your support by leaving a like. I'd really appreciate it. And Bidoof is taking my spot here today in the webcam slot because my webcam still has some issues. And so thanks for bearing with me while I have some technical difficulties, but I hope you enjoyed the Bidoof. So let's talk a little bit first about Ho-Oh. Why is this Pokemon not really used very much in Series 12? Well, it basically has a lot of common weaknesses, right? You're weak to water, so Kyogre. You're weak to rock, so, Groudon, for example, with max rockfall. And you're also weak to electric, so Pokemon like Regieleki and Thundurus can give you some trouble. So that's one of the primary reasons. It's not exactly super speedy, and it also doesn't necessarily do a ton of damage. And so basically, this team tries to solve for a lot of those problems, right? Okay, well, Ho-Oh is weak to all of these Pokemon, but Grimmsnarl with the Light Claim, the dual screens, will really allow Ho-Oh to survive even the strongest max moves that you're often going to go up against, even if they're super effective. So that solves one of the issues. Ho-Oh, is of course going to be a little bit slower pace, but you can increase your speed via max airstream here, as well as potentially playing under Trick Room with Porygon 2. And finally, to increase Ho-Oh's damage output, you've got the weakness policy on it. It's actually really difficult to, deal with Ho-Oh without activating its weakness policy, or I should say deal good damage to it, because without the super effective hits, you're really not going to do very much into it at all, and almost every team in the format, I feel like, has at least one way to hit Ho-Oh for super effective damage. And so often your opponents will actually activate your weakness policy for you, but if they don't, you also have Dragapult here with Surf to self-activate the Ho-Oh. So very much like Dragapult and Colossal, this time around you've got Dragapult and Ho-Oh instead. Groudon is going to be the other restricted Pokemon of choice here, and that is for a bunch of different reasons. First of all, this allows you to set up the Sun, and so Ho-Oh can deal more damage with Sacred Fire or Max Flare, and it also reduces the damage output of Water-type attacks coming out from Pokemon like Kyogre. And Groudon on this team, I think, is actually a pretty solid Dynamax option as well. So there are a lot of different ways that you can play with the team, but generally it's very heavily centered around, obviously, Ho-Oh and Groudon. The rest of the Pokemon don't really do huge amounts of damage, and you have to be a little bit careful about kind of running out of damage if, you're stuck with just those Pokemon. But Ho-Oh and Groudon are just such absolute monsters on this team, and they pair really nicely together. So Dragapult's on the team to enable the policy on Ho-Oh. This is a Focus Sash set, and Focus Sash is really important because Dragapult is just going to be slower than a lot of common Pokemon like Calyrex and Zacian, but with the Focus Sash, you can take a big hit and then retaliate back, right? Imagine Zacian outspeeds you, they go for Behemoth Blade or Play Rough onto you, but then you just hit them with the Will-O-Wisp. That's obviously super valuable. Or you just survive and then Surf, activate Policy on Ho-Oh, and then sweep with Ho-Oh from there, right? Grimmsnarl and Gastrodon here are basically the standard sets that you'll always see, and Porygon 2 here is Ice Beam and Foul Play with Trace. And so Trace is valuable because it can scout out for opposing abilities, and that can be very valuable into certain Pokemon in the format. So the general idea is that you're going to be really bulky here, and you're not necessarily going to move before your opponent. In fact, a lot of Pokemon in the format are going to outspeed you, but that's okay because Grimmsnarl has the screen support, and Ho-Oh can also boost its speed via Max Airstream. I found a bunch of different ways that you can play with the team in my experience so far. One lead is just Dragapult Ho-Oh with Groudon and then a fourth in the back. This really works when your opponents don't have any way to really threaten Ho-Oh with the big one-hit knockout on turn 1 of the game. And even if they have two strong Pokemon on the field, neither can knock out Ho-Oh in combination. So Dragapult Ho-Oh is one mode you can go with. Grimmsnarl, Ho-Oh, Grimmsnarl, Porygon, Grimmsnarl, Groudon are all also really, really viable, in my opinion, right? Like with Grim Ho-Oh, you can just set up the screens immediately. Do keep in mind, though, that I think because this team relies so heavily on Ho-Oh and Groudon for damage output, you don't want to Dynamax too early and essentially lose a lot of pressure if your opponent's able to stall out your Dynamax. And so I'm not saying to always Dynamax late, but if you are Dynamaxing early, you got to make sure that you can actually deal enough damage in those first 3 turns. So Grim Porygon's going to be your best bet if you just want to, set up Trick Room, for example, and then play under Trick Room, which can be really valuable, especially against faster-paced teams. And then the Gastrodon's really on the team because obviously Kyogre otherwise can be a huge issue, right? You don't even necessarily need to bring it. It's normally going to come out mainly against either Kyogre teams or teams that are really passive and weak to Yawn. And the general idea is even having Gastrodon in team preview makes your opponents more hesitant on Dynamaxing Kyogre and just going for Max Geyser. So sometimes even if a Pokemon doesn't come out in a battle, it can really make it a lot harder for your opponent. So yeah. General idea is to enable the Ho-Oh as much as possible, but you can max Groudon, and even Dragapult can max. That's why it has Phantom Force. That can allow you to get some cool combos off where you max Phantasm, lower your opponent's defense, and then Ho-Oh and Groudon can take advantage of it. So yeah, really excited to feature this one. It's been a while since we've used Ho-Oh on the channel, so thank you so much as always for watching, and let's get started. Alright, our first game of the day here, and we are up against very classic Sun here. So as always, the main question is what deviations, does our opponent have with their team in terms of item choice on Charizard, on Grimmsnarl, and on Groudon. The Grimmsnarl sets are typically either Trick Iron Ball or Light Clay dual screens. Charizard can run Life Orb, Charty Berry, Lumberry even. Groudon can be Assault Vest, but certainly can be something like White Herb or Citrus Berry as well. So I think Ho-Oh overall is solid here. If we want to bring it, the main thing I do want to be a little bit careful about is the potential max Rockfall from Charizard, because that is one thing you do occasionally see. And as you can see, Ho-Oh here is going to be slower than Charizard. I mean, Charizard's pretty much always max speed, so that's not really a surprise. But that's one thing we'll want to be mindful of. In this game, I think Ho-Oh's good, but it actually might be better as a non-Dynamax option, whereas Groudon might actually be a solid max option here. Dragapult's also interesting, because, we can flex it as a potential max Pokemon here. I think I'm going to go with the top 4, it's just figuring out in what order. I don't mind a Grimmsnarl lead. Yeah, I'm, somewhat intrigued by the idea of Grimmsnarl and you know what, I think Grimmsnarl Groudon is best with Ho-Oh and Dragapult in the back. And the reason why I think this is because if I'm bringing Dragapult, I mainly want it to accomplish two things. The first is to activate a weakness policy on Ho-Oh, and the second is to potentially Dynamax it and max Phantasm. But if you look at the matchup here, it's going to be pretty difficult to just easily lead something like Dragapult and Ho-Oh comfortably, because they could just go with something like Grimmsnarl and Charizard, right? So it is going to be Grim and Gastrodon. Okay, I don't mind that. It's actually more passive than I thought they'd opt for here. So the main thing to worry about from Gastrodon's end is obviously going to be Yawn, but Gastrodon is incredibly passive in terms of damage output here, and so I think we can really take advantage of that to start the game. I could even just go for a KO. Turn 1 I could just Spirit Break, Dynamax, and actually just Max Quake onto the Gastrodon slot. That's definitely a possibility. They could probably just set up a Reflect though, right? And then if they Yawn into me, that's obviously not great. One funky thing we can do in this game is actually Dynamaxing Grimmsnarl just to prevent Yawn, by the way, which I think is kind of cool. So, turn 1, I'm down to just actually go for a Spirit Break and a Precipice Blades. Actually, I think I'd rather Heat Crash here just to guarantee a knockout on a Grimmsnarl. Yep, they just go for Reflect, that's fine. And I opted not to go for screens on turn 1 to stagger it by a turn because I don't expect to take much damage this first turn anyway. It's great damage from Heat Crash, and yeah, with Precipice Blades, if Reflect were up, I'm not sure we actually get the knockout there, so... Ooh, actually, we still don't get the knockout there. Okay. It is going to be Yawn coming out from the Gastrodon. I'm honestly really thinking about maxing Grim here. It's so niche, though, as a play, but it's just to slow down their momentum by a little bit. I can probably get away with not maxing it, though. They'll probably Yawn again into that slot, which is fine. At this point, I don't mind going for a Reflect this turn. I mean, actually, if I knock out the Grimmsnarl here, then I can just Thunder Wave whatever's coming in, so... Okay. We still don't really need screens up yet, so I'm down to Spirit Break into Grim. Switch Groudon out. And in this position, I actually don't mind going to Dragapult, because if we knock out the Grimmsnarl, then they're going to have to replace the Grim with most likely what's going to be either Zacian or the Groudon, and I can Will-O-Wisp either of those, which is very valuable. Okay, actually go for Thunder Wave there to cover for a switch. I don't really mind that, though, because now you can't Yawn that slot. So we go up 4-3 quickly. And the T-Wave here will mean that now if Groudon comes out, obviously it'll be faster than Dragapult, but that's fine, and it's going to be Yawn into the Grimmsnarl slot. So I like the T-Wave onto the Groudon slot. It means, you know, either Groudon falls asleep or you manage to get Dragapult or you know, Ho-Oh, for example, and manage to put that to sleep. Or paralyze it, excuse me. Okay, so Charizard comes out for my opponent. Which is interesting. That means they didn't bring one of Groudon or Zacian. Probably Zacian, to be honest. This is a very anti-Zacian matchup. Okay, so with that, I'm down to just Light Screen here. And what do I expect? Airstream into Ho-Oh? Or sorry, into Dragapult? I think Light Screen's definitely acceptable here. I don't really want to Surf. I don't really get value out of Will-O-Wisp, so I'm down for just a Light Screen and a Phantom Force here. And the reason for the Phantom Force is because with that onto the Charizard slot, then they are going to struggle. Like, even if they have Charty Berry, well, I guess they have Reflect Off, actually. So if you have Reflect and Charty Berry, then even after Phantom Force, I'm not sure Max Rockfall from Groudon's KOing the Charizard. So I like this passive lead from their end in the end, because I think Yawn, the pressure from that is just really valuable for my opponent right now. I also could have opted to click Thunder Wave there, but if they're Lumberry, then that's super bad for me. Okay, they are just going to opt for the Wildfire here. They're actually going to target the Dragapult slot, which makes a lot of sense. Okay. Phantom Force allows us to disappear. Now we're going to get a little bit of free damage onto the Charizard slot. They do indeed go for a Yawn, and it fails. Okay. So I take a little bit of Wildfire damage. More than a little bit, and I'm going to faint to another one, but that's fine. And Grimmsnarl falls asleep. Okay, but we did get Light Screen up, which is obviously pretty critical right now, given what we have in the back. So now, I mean, I have to burn a turn of sleep here. I'm not really going to accomplish anything this turn anyway. So we'll most likely lose both Pokemon here. Gastrodon's going to switch out. And that should be Groudon coming in, right? Yeah. Okay. And they're going to Airstream here to give Groudon a speed boost, I think. Which would make a lot of sense. Yep, there it is. Grimmsnarl, interestingly enough, does survive, so we actually have a chance to wake up this next turn, which would actually be pretty sweet. We're not going to get parried on the Phantom Force, so that's some nice damage onto the Charizard. Dragapult's going to faint from Wildfire here. It's the last turn of Dynamax on Charizard's end. Groudon on their end could definitely carry Stone Edge, but I do have Reflect up. Oh, sorry, I don't have Reflect up. I only have Light Screen up so far. Yeah. A Groudon here also. Like, if you're my opponent, you're just going to double up onto my whatever's coming out right now, right? Okay. So I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to bring out Ho-Oh. I'm going to max guard the Ho-Oh. And if we get Reflect up, like if Grim wakes up here, I think we're in a very commanding position. Even if it doesn't, I think it's still okay. But we're going to go for max guard here. I've set up Light Screen. I still have Assault Vest with the Groudon in the back. And so post Dynamax, right, Groudon can definitely take a big fire type attack from the Charizard, especially given that Charizard here is not Life Orbed. So this one's pretty interesting. Like, I could have led Dragapult and Ho-Oh in the end, but I think Ho-Oh here just doesn't really love facing down like an early Charizard or Groudon, but now we've actually stalled out our opponent's max. Even though we'll only have 2 turns of Dynamax with Ho-Oh here, I think that's more than enough. Depending on what their rock type attack is. We actually do manage to wake up with the Grimmsnarl, which is excellent here. So that now allows us to set up a Reflect, which is huge. And they actually commit Airstream into the Ho-Oh, and I expect a Stone Edge here. It's Rock Slide, which is even better for us. That means they're not going to come close to knocking out the Ho-Oh. So that means that even if we didn't get Reflect up, I think we're probably in decent shape anyway, but Stone Edge is a decently common attack on Groudon. Sun also fades here, but of course I'm bringing out my Groudon just to set it back up, but that's fine. And now what I can do is get a speed boost onto my Ho-Oh via max Airstream. I guess the other thing I want to consider is maybe just knocking out their Groudon right now. Gastrodon's obviously my opponent's last Pokemon. I still have 2 turns of Dynamax, but we've managed to stagger our Dynamax quite nicely in this game. And I've still got multiple turns of screens up. They've still got 3 turns of reflect. I'm like, the one thing I guess I'm a little bit worried about is if they're max speed on Groudon, but that's so rare on these compositions that I think we can get away with Rock Slide here into a max Airstream. Yeah. I guess you could also have Ancient Power here, but Groudon actually switches. Oh, wow. So the switch makes sense, right? You're trying to take a Fire-type attack and stall out my Dynamax right now. It's just going to be Blast Burn here, but with the AV and the Light Screen, we should survive this. Yep. Okay, beautiful. And now we get a speed boost, which is really critical for this endgame. Excellent. Does just under 50% to Gastrodon there, but that's more than enough, I think. Because Rock Slide here now will finish off Charizard. I guess it could be Chardy Charizard in this position. Let's see. It indeed is Chardy, but that's fine. In fact, I'd actually argue that works out more in my favor because now it's just a useless turn for Charizard, right? They can't do anything this subsequent turn. And they're actually going to faint from Solar Power after this turn. So take more Wildfire, but I should survive one last bit of it. Now onto the Gastrodon slot. You expect Gastrodon to go for a Protect, which would make sense. But because we've got screens up, Ho is poised for success in this endgame. So I'm just going to go for a Precipice Blades here and go for a Max Airstream here onto the Ho slot. Since it's likely Gastrodon's going to commit a Protect here, like it could have been worth it to Max Quake if my opponent had like, you know, Pokemon that deal special damage after other than Charizard. But at this point, a special defense boost doesn't really hold that much value in this game, so I'd rather just get a little bit more damage through the Protect. Although I guess like it's not really that much damage, although it's enough where I think another Airstream will KO, and that's actually all I need right now. Yeah. So Charizard's going to faint from Solar Power. That was the nice thing about knowing we could ignore it. Yep, there's leftovers. And that first Airstream did just under 50%, and so to maximize our damage output there... Well, actually, they have stalled on my Dynamax, I suppose. Meaning I'd have to click Brave Bird and Precipice Blades here, which I'm okay with. Reflect is also about to end on their end, but what I don't want to happen here is for them to get a single target Rock Slide off at any point. So the last one, Reflect. I'm fine just clicking Precipice Blades here and just Brave Bird here onto Gastrodon. And as long as we don't miss Precipice Blades, it should just be a knockout onto Gastrodon. Both of my Pokemon should survive the turn. You activate my weakness policy, and then I just simply Sacred Fire for the win. The only downside here is that I could miss Precipice Blades, so one thing I could have considered was going for a more accurate attack on Gastrodon there. Just wasn't sure how well Gastrodon would take the double up there, and I wanted to just guarantee that we could get the knockout. Ooh, you're not a Solvest Groudon. Okay. They actually bust out the Swords Dance here. That's really cool. Okay, with Swords Dance coming out, still have 4 turns of Reflect here. I don't even know if a Rock Slide would KO Groudon. I don't expect it to be honest. So, yeah, I'm down to just Precipice Blades here. I will take the slight chance of missing Sacred Fire because a burn here would also immediately win us the game. So Ho does not miss the Sacred Fire. Beautiful. Sacred Fire in the sun. Will not get the knockout, but it will get the burn here. Burn wouldn't really matter if Precipice Blades connects here, though. Although it looks like they are Swords Dance Citrus. So this is what I mean, right? Normally when you see the opposing team, you probably expect it to be Assault Vest because that's like what the original version of the team had. But in this case, my opponent actually switched it up by going back to like the standard Citrus Berry Swords Dance set. So yeah. In this game, it was really all about patience. You know, we didn't really get to go with the Dragapult Ho-Oh lead, but I was okay with that because I felt like if I could stall out my opponent's Dynamax, we'd be in really, really good shape. Now, one thing to note is, of course, Grimmsnarl did manage to wake up after just 1 turn, so it allowed me to set up the Reflect, which meant that the Groudon would struggle a little bit more. But because they were Rock Slide and not Stone Edge, and with Ho-Oh as bulky as it is, I actually don't think Grimmsnarl waking up there actually made too much of a difference. But this was interesting because my opponent went with a really passive lead, but it actually worked out really nicely because they were able to spread Yawn and status conditions. But in the end, Gastrodon was never really putting on very much offensive pressure, and by getting up that light screen, the Charizard struggled to actually pick up like too many KOs before things got out of control. So yeah, really glad that Ho-Oh could really shine in this endgame for us, so let's look for another. Our next match of the day, and we're up against Calyrex plus Zacian. Now, what's interesting about this team is that, you know, they're pretty much running all of the standard Pokemon you see on Calyrex Zacian teams. The one thing to note is that they actually have both Thundurus and Regieleki, which isn't exactly super common because they often kind of fulfill a somewhat similar role on these compositions. Normally, these teams are really weak to Trick Room. So if I can get Trick Room up, which we, obviously have with Porygon 2, that would be amazing. But it's a little bit easier said than done. Ho is quite excellent into Zacian as well as Rillaboom. It's okay into Calyrex. Doesn't love going up against the electric types. So if I were to in my opponent's shoes, what would I bring? Definitely Calyrex and Zacian. I'd bring one of the electric types and then Blastoise, personally. How do they deny Trick Room here? It'd most likely be through just like KOing Porygon. And I also could consider Gastrodon in this one, but I think I like the idea of Grimmsnarl plus Porygon here, because we can just foul play with Porygon as well. Grim Porygon and the Ho-Oh Groudon in the back. It's a little bit awkward for the Dragapult here because we're going up against like basically all three of the Pokemon in the format that outspeed us that are common, which are Regieleki, Calyrex, and Zacian. And it's just too easy for Dragapult to faint, even considering the fact that we have Focus Sash. So I don't feel comfortable with Dragapult here. I'm going to play a little bit more passively because my opponent's team is really hyper-offensive. It's going to be Lecky and Thundurus. I'll tell you what, in this position, I kind of expect it to be Prankster, Eerie Impulse, Thundurus, and I kind of expect them to just max Lightning. But no, it's actually Defiant. This also highlights the value of Trace, by the way, right? Like, being able to know what my opponent's ability is immediately is so valuable. Okay. I really didn't think they'd go with both electric types. Like, Groudon should just single-handedly win the game now if we get Trick Room up. I'm more concerned about a Regieleki Dynamax here, I think. So I'm going to Light Screen a cover for the Eleki Dynamax and then Trick Room here. One of the two should max, but actually it's neither. Oh, it could be Taunt, Defiant, Thundurus. That could be the case. They are going for Screech into Superpower. Oh, no, it's not even Superpower. It's Wild Charge. And they targeted Grim. Huh. That's a really cool attack. I'm just surprised they didn't try to go all in on knocking out Porygon on turn 1. Now they're just in really bad shape, to be honest. I got Light Screen up. Now I can just set up Reflect and Foul Play. I mean, they don't have a Trick Room matchup here, in my opinion. So we'll see. We'll see. But they opt to not Dynamax, which is interesting as well. I get both screens up. I get away pretty lucky on turn 1, but then they also made a play that didn't actually really punish me that heavily, so it was fine. Okay, that's cool. They do have Brick Break here, so it's not Brick Break, or it's not Superpower, it's Brick Break. That actually allows them to deny me both of my screens, which is actually pretty important here. I could have clicked Spirit Break into Thundurus instead, but I was afraid of it Dynamaxing and then me activating like the policy on it. I'm fine to just go out into Groudon right now, honestly. I guess if they don't, like, there's a good chance they didn't bring Zacian here, right? So it could be Calyrex, Blastoise, Rillaboom in the back would be very interesting, in my opinion. We know it's Screech, Regieleki. I don't really need to go for... Like, I think Heat Crash into Lecky here is fine. I don't really need to click Precipice Blades, because I'm not really at the risk of taking damage with Groudon right now from Regieleki. Okay, Thundurus switches out. They did bring Zacian. This would have been the reason to click Precipice Blades, I suppose, because it would cover for a switch in, but I still feel okay about it. Okay. They don't protect Lecky. This is one of the matchups where I think my opponent's Trick Room matchup is just so bad that I can get away with making plays like this, right? And if I go for Precipice Blades, I can also let my opponent get back into the game with the single miss, which is bad. Okay, and they're going to go for Screech on a Groudon. That's fine. Now, what's interesting is if Rillaboom's their last one rather than Calyrex. But, like, we still have 2 turns of Trick Room to work with here. I'm down to just Heat Crash into the Zacian slot. And truthfully, a Lecky being on the field right now hurts my opponent more than it helps them. But, like, I want to foul play Zacian as well here. That's fine to click foul play into a Lecky. Okay, Zacian switches out. I think they're baiting a Max Quake here. Yeah, they go back into Thundurus, and so as long as we don't fall into that trap, we're fine. Okay, Lucky protects. Yep, that's fine. That's why normally on Calyrex Zacian teams, you either have a way to like really hard deny Trick Room, for example, imprison Trick Room on Calyrex, or you have a way to slow down the damage output and like apply pressure onto my end that's not solely from damage, and so like Yawn Gastrodon would be an example, or Yawn Blastoise. So the route my opponent took was definitely a little bit unexpected. Okay, Calyrex actually comes out for my opponent now. Sash was on a Lucky, by the way, so we know that the Sash is not actually on Calyrex, which is a pretty important piece of information. So it could be Specs or Life Orb. I kind of expect Life Orb in this position. I am at -2 defense here, so Groudon will actually just fade to a Behemoth Blade later on. So here I'd rather switch into Ho-Oh and go for a Foul Play here onto the Regieleki. Yeah, because then we put ourselves in a position where the Ho-Oh and the Groudon are both just really solid into my opponent's entire team. To their credit, they've done a really good job of stalling out Dynamax right now. Oh, it's going to be Max immediately from the Calyrex. Okay. I like that a lot, actually, because the Calyrex wasn't really at risk of getting knocked out immediately this turn, meaning that you can actually launch Max Phantasm into the Ho-Oh slot. This actually, I think, gives them a pretty good shot at coming back in the game right now. I really like that play. Oh, but they actually max guarded. Okay. Granted, like, one thing they did have to worry about in that position was a Foul Play and then, like, a Max Quake into the Calyrex slot, but I was thinking if they take the risk and Phantasm me there, they actually might be in pretty great shape. However, now it's going to be pretty tough for them, I think. Zacian comes out. It also could have been Specs Calyrex, and so they might have felt like I need to Max Guard here just to, like, basically get out of my Specs. Because if you look at my opponent's team, well, I guess Aleki's not actually that much of a Dynamax option given the Screech. Okay, so you can't knock out both of my Pokemon right now. And late game Groudon is excellent here, especially because we have Shadow Claw. And the question is whether or not I want to max Ho-Oh here. I think maxing is fine. Max to get more HP, max Flare, and click Trick Room here. Yeah, I actually think I would have been in pretty bad shape if my opponent attacked with Calyrex last turn. So, like, this game should have been guaranteed after turn 1, it felt like. Because as soon as Trick Room goes up against their team, we should be in really great shape. And one thing that set me back a little bit was not clicking Precipice Blades with Groudon, because they actually managed to switch in Zacian for free, right? Whereas if I click Blades there, the Zacian would have actually just fainted. And if Zacian faints and you lose a Pokemon that quickly under Trick Room, it's just really bad. And they're actually Mind Storming onto Porygon, so if I had to guess, they're doubling up onto it to try to get the knockout and deny me Trick Room, which makes sense. The other play you could have made is like Phantasm into Ho-Oh. And yeah, it is indeed Life Orb on Calyrex, okay. And a Sacred Sword, but I'll take that trade any day, right? I just knocked out Zacian, now it's a 2v1 with Groudon. I guess what becomes interesting here is if you're able to one-shot Groudon with the Max Mindstorm in Psychic Terrain, but with the Salt Vest, I really don't expect that. It could also have Max Overgrowth, because Gastrodon is actually a pretty big issue for my opponent's team, which is funny because we actually have a Gastrodon, but I didn't bring it here. So, now we get Groudon out. Okay, lost no Dynamax on their end as well. Even after a speed boost here, Ho-Oh's not going to outspeed the opposing Calyrex. Yeah, 126. So we're better off just going for our strongest, damaging move here, which is Max Flare in the Sun. And I'll just go for Shadow Claw as well. So if they don't one-shot Groudon here, the game's just immediately over. Even if they do, I think we still are in decent shape, actually. And that was actually closer than I would have expected it to be. But we are able to survive here in the end. So there's the Max Flare. Yeah, and see, the thing is, if my opponent got the knockout, your Dynamax would end immediately, right? And so then you'd be counting on either a single target Astral Barrage at +1 with Life Orb, or a single target Expanding Force / Psyshock to get the knockout onto Ho-Oh, because I'm just going to KO you through Protect. So even if they got, you know, a critical hit onto Groudon there, I think we would have still been fine anyway. Now, I did get pretty lucky in the early game here with the, you know, Screech Miss from Regieleki. I definitely wasn't expecting that. But given they're targeting that turn, and given how well Grimm survived anyway, I think we actually would have been okay. But definitely would have been interesting. And, you know, if they actually had Superpower instead of Brick Break there, then they could have gone for Screech and Superpower and a Porygon on turn 1. I would have not expected that at all. And then they would have been able to actually deny me the Trick Room, which could have been pretty bad for us, but fortunately enough, that was not the case. And then Porygon's Trace here was such a big deal because it meant I didn't have to worry about a potential supportive Thundurus rather than the Defiant offensive variant. So yeah, you can see how well Ho-Oh can match up against a lot of these Zacian teams. So let's look for one more. Third game of the day here, and oof, it's Oranguru, Calyrex, Ice Rider. Typically, like, when you see those two, you should expect, like, Oranguru to give Calyrex a choice band via Symbiosis. There's normally some shenanigans in the early game, like I've gone up against Misty Explosion, like Xerneas before. It's definitely a little bit awkward. Grimm can just set up screens, but I don't actually have ice resistance. I mean, I think Grimm Porygon are both pretty solid here. One mode I could consider is actually just Dragapult and Ho-Oh. They could go, if they wanted to go Trick Room, what? You would lead Clefable and Grimm, maybe? Or Oranguru? I mean, is it really going to be, like, the choice band stuff here? I actually kind of don't expect that to be the case. I'm always down for Grimmsnarl for screens early here. Grimm. I kind of want a more offensive lead. I'm going with Grimm Porygon just because it's like super safe here. Like I can always, well, I guess I said always, but if they lead Rillaboom plus Kyogre, you would actually prevent me from setting up a screen on turn 1. So very curious about my opponent's team. They have a lot of interesting picks, right? It's like Kyogre Calyrex is a restricted duo, Torkoal's on the team, and then you have a Clefable as well as a Oranguru. So a lot of cool stuff here. It is going to be Clefable Oranguru. Okay. And this is the reason why I was thinking like a more offensive lead could be good, but at the same time, like I can reverse their Trick Room at any point with Porygon. Okay, we trace Magic Guard. Yeah, what do I want to do turn 1? Spirit Break Clefable. And I don't want to reveal Foul Play yet. So I'll Spirit Break and Ice Beam Clefable turn 1. Because the thing is, this lead is super passive. Oh, it might actually... Does Clefable get Misty Explosion? I think the play I would have rather made was Reflect with Grimm and then... Or Light Screen with Grimm and then click Trick Room with Porygon. Okay. Spirit Break and Ice Beam. Okay, they just go for Moonblast. I'm good with that then. That's fine. Cool. Oh, interesting. They actually taunt my Porygon. Okay. Pretty cool to see. We should get screens up right now. I'd rather get Reflect up first. And I'm actually down to switch into Groudon right now. I think basically the downside for my opponent is Clefable Oranguru is a very passive lead. Now, they actually have Moonblast and a Grimmsnarl, so it actually does, you know, some damage. But it's not that scary. And we got pretty meaningful damage on a Clefable, so I'm pretty happy about that. Because it's obviously a decently bulky Pokemon. Okay, they just go for Follow Me this time around. Yep, that's fine. I kind of expect Trick Room to go up now. Yes, okay. So I could pretty easily Light Screen right now. Now, one thing to note is that I can't just reverse their Trick Room because they do have Taunt on Oranguru. So I'm down to Light Screen right now. And I'm actually going to click Rock Slide here, I think, because I don't want to give them a free switch in a Calyrex Ice Rider. If I click Press with Blades. I also don't want to knock out Clefable here, because once again, Clefable doesn't do much for my opponent at the moment. So I'm down to get up both screens and click Rock Slide here. Nice, and they stay in. Good. Okay. Oranguru could have Foul Play here, so we'll see. Either way, it's another Moonblast going on to Grimm here. Okay, cool. It's fine. And they actually just Instruct. Okay. So we've seen Instruct, Trick Room, and Taunt so far. None of those are really that concerning. My main fear in this game is, like, Choice Band Calyrex Ice Rider, because I've lost to that one too many times. Rock Slide here is actually going to miss the Oranguru. That's fine. It's going to connect onto Clefable. Cool. Doesn't do much damage, but that's what I'm looking for here, because that's already one turn of Trick Room down, and even stalling out a single turn here is a very big deal. Now I can go into the Porygon slot. And I don't want to Heat Crash here because I don't want Clefable to redirect it. I'm almost down to... Which Shadow Claw? Okay, oh no, Rock Slide's our weakest attack here. I'm intentionally going for my weakest attack right now, which is a fun scenario. Ooh, this could be Calyrex coming in, though, to eat the Rock Slide. Oh, but they actually brought Rillaboom. So, they dropped the Restricted. Very interesting. Okay. I don't mind that, because right now, my opponent's Ho-Oh matchup is terrible, right? Like, none of the Pokemon they've brought so far threaten Ho-Oh in the slightest. Meaning that, yeah, Trick Room is up right now, but you're getting no value out of it at the moment. Although, here, Heat Crash into the Rillaboom slot would have been amazing, right? But giving him the Follow Me here would have just been redirected. Okay, makes sense. And this is basically one of the major downsides of, like, an ultra-passive lead combination in Clefable and Oranguru. Like, yeah, you get Trick Room up, but then if you want to get your sweepers in and I intentionally don't knock out your redirection user, it makes it so much harder for my opponents, right? So there's only 2 turns of Trick Room left at this point. I don't even need to switch out Groudon here, because, like... I do have Terrain up, but I think here I'd rather click Ice Beam onto Clefable, get the knockout onto it, and then switch Groudon out into Grimm. Grimm has served its purpose in this game, which was getting both screens up, and I don't think I really need another set of screens after the 8 turns expire. And so I'd rather just stall another turn of Trick Room, try to scout out for what Rillaboom wants to go for. Okay, Clefable just goes for a Follow Me. That's perfectly fine. Yeah, no Grassy Glide there. I mean, I was considering just Ice Beaming Clefable, maxing Groudon, and just, like, max flaring Rillaboom, but I still don't know what my opponent's Restricted is here, so I don't feel the need to go for that. And it is just going to be Wood Hammer here. Perfect. Okay. It's a Grimm Faints, but that's fine. Rillaboom's matchup into Ho-Oh is really bad. It's one of the many reasons why, as I mentioned, Ho-Oh can be a solid pick in this format. So, now we can just bring Ho-Oh out. Oranguru's in the back. That doesn't really scare me at all. And they actually bring it in here, which I'm really surprised about, but I think that's amazing for us here. So it's the last turn of Trick Room as well. Not really worried about their damage output. I guess you could just Wood Hammer and Instruct. At this point, I think Ho-Oh should commit the Dynamax here, just because we have a potential KO to take on Oranguru. And I don't really care about Rillaboom at all, because it can't do anything into Ho-Oh. So here I'm down to just Foul Play into Oranguru, max the Ho-Oh, and max Flare. The only downside here is Oranguru is not exactly a very common Pokemon in VGC, so I'm just worried about, like, an unexpected move here. But we've already seen Taunt, Trick Room, and Instruct. I would expect it to have an attacking move. Although, Oranguru is very much like Gothitelle, where you really don't need an attacking move here. Now, I believe it gets access to Foul Play, so if there were any attacking move, that would be it. But, yeah, I'm really surprised to see Rillaboom here, honestly, because if you look at our team composition, like, we have a Groudon, we have a Ho-Oh. Rillaboom's good against Groudon, it's very poor into Ho-Oh. It's not particularly amazing into the rest, but I think what my opponent was probably going for was they were expecting me to bring Gastrodon to counter their Kyogre. But I don't really feel like I need to counter the Kyogre that hard, because we have decent resources for the rest of the team. So, it is just going to be Instruct, that's fine. I don't even think 2 Wood Hammers knocks out Porygon here, to be honest. And it's actually into the Ho-Oh slot. Cool. Yeah, and so it's like Rillaboom now is just completely useless for my opponent. Foul Play doesn't do much there, but that's fine. Just get some chip damage. Now Wood Hammer goes onto the Porygon slot, and you can see with the Reflect, we take that very, very nicely. And now Flare here should KO the Oranguru. Although I don't know like my Ho-Oh calc super well in the sun, but yeah, that is enough. Cool. And so now their last one's going to be either Kyogre or Calyrex Ice Rider. Given the fact that they brought Rillaboom, I'd really think it's Kyogre, because otherwise why prioritize Rillaboom so much, right? To me, if you're bringing Rillaboom, it signals that you want to KO Gastrodon. This is one of the tough things about Pokemon, though, right? It's very hard to like consistently get the 4 right Pokemon in every match. So their last one is indeed going to be the Kyogre here, okay, as expected. I still have Light Screen here, so I don't really have to worry too much about Kyogre's damage output. Kyogre could definitely pull this back right now, though, so I do want to be a little bit careful. But I think with Light Screen... Ooh, actually, I don't want to switch into Groudon, do I? Because they could Grassy Glide that slot. And I'll definitely survive a Max Geyser with Ho-Oh right now because of Light Screen. Okay. I'm actually just going to click Recover here then, and then Airstream into the Rillaboom slot. With the expectation that they Geyser... And there's a chance they Geyser into Porygon, right? Because my obvious play is to switch Porygon out into the Groudon, change the weather. But what I'm worried about is that they double up onto the Porygon slot with the Grassy Glide and a Max Geyser. I could be overestimating Ho-Oh's bulk here, though. But with Light Screen, I feel decently confident I can survive the super effective Geyser from Kyogre. So we'll see. Oh, they didn't even go for Glide. Okay, that's interesting. Okay, and we're also faster than the Kyogre, so it's a little bit bulkier here. So this means that if I switch into Groudon, I indeed would have been fine, but... yeah, actually, I guess well, no, I was expecting Glide from Rillaboom, not Woodhammer. So I'm mainly curious if they activate my weakness policy here. Now I'm actually just faster with Porygon as well, so... Okay, their Kyogre is ultra slow. Interesting. There's Geyser, presumably into Ho-Oh, which will activate our weakness policy. And we do survive that comfortably. Cool. Glad my estimates weren't crazy off there, although obviously if they were Life Orb, that would have done 30% more. But now that activates our weakness policy. Beautiful. Another turn of Dynamax. Now I actually do feel comfortable switching into Groudon and going for a Max Airstream, because I have the policy boost. If I didn't have the policy boost, I'd have to think a bit more about, conserving Groudon, making sure it's in a good spot to just KO Kyogre in the end game. But here, like, by switching to Groudon, I also give it a speed boost, so I ensure that I outspeed Kyogre. And with Assault Vest and Light Screen here, Geyser is not going to knock out either Pokemon. Now, I guess the one scary thing is if you crit Geyser onto Ho-Oh, that actually would get the knockout onto it. And then you change the weather. So then I could lose to a Precipice Bladesmith. Look how much that policy Airstream does, by the way. We almost just KO Ho-Oh by itself. Sorry, we KO Kyogre. Almost KO Kyogre by itself. Okay. And another Geyser here. Yep. But we should survive, like I mentioned. Beautiful. Look how little damage that does after the Light Screen and the Sun. I just had to be careful last turn because I thought there was a pretty solid chance my opponent would double up on a Porygon. That's the play I would make, because if you catch Groudon on the switch-in, you actually give yourself a pretty solid chance of winning the game. And I wanted to eliminate the Rillaboom just to get it out of the way, right? So, Ho-Oh's Dynamax ends now, but we are basically set here. It's better to switch into Porygon here in case for some reason Brave Bird does not get the KO. And the reason we want to do this is because it's the last turn of Kyogre's Dynamax, and so by making the switch, we always guarantee that Groudon will be able to change the weather. But yeah, at this point, yeah, Kyogre can't really do very much. So I think the main thing that was tough for my opponent in this game is that I just never gave them a free switch in. And then, they also brought Rillaboom over Calyrex, which I think makes a lot of sense because, like I said, they were clearly trying to cover for Gastrodon, right? So it was Brutal Swing indeed here, but Mentorb instead on the Oranguru. Yeah, you can see there's Policy Calyrex Ice Rider here. Now, what's interesting is that they did have Seed Bomb, so you do have another path into the Gastrodon slot. So I don't know if they needed to be that scared of Gastrodon that Rillaboom had to come out over Calyrex here, because then Calyrex would have just given me a much tougher time. And yeah, I should have actually covered that it was Iron Ball on Kyogre, because when Porygon outsped it, like Porygon is so slow that you shouldn't expect to outspeed Kyogre even after a single speed boost. So Iron Ball is really interesting there. Obviously helpful when you have Trick Room up, and not so helpful when Trick Room is not up. Assault Vest on the Rillaboom there. Life Orb on Torkoal. That's really interesting with Flamethrower, Solar Beam, Eruption, and Protect. And then Safety Goggles on Clefable here. So we saw the Moonblast and the Follow Me, but never the Helping Hand and the Ally switch. So yeah, you know, a lead like Oranguru Clefable reminds me very much of like Indeedee Porygon or Amoonguss Dusclops, where, okay, you know, you have a strong turn 1, you get Trick Room up, where do you go from there? Now, Amoonguss is like really valuable because you can go for Spores. This Clefable actually, funnily enough, has Safety Goggles, so it helps against opposing Amoongusses. But past turn 1, I think, yeah, especially because my opponent brought Rillaboom, they were just in a really tough spot. If they had Calyrex, then you could at least, like, you know, gamble a little bit and say, you know what, I am just going to switch out into the Calyrex Ice Rider, just activate the Policy and Brutal Swing immediately, and then really try to win the game from turn 2 onwards. And so, yeah, because they had Rillaboom over Calyrex, I think the game was a lot tougher because they basically had no position to really switch out into their offense, and the opening turns worked out really well for me as well. So it's always interesting, like, finding examples where you don't intentionally knock out your opponent's Pokemon to deny them free switch-ins, and that worked out super well for us in this one. So, yeah, that's going to be it for this one. I had a lot of fun using Ho-Oh, so thank you so much as always for watching. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Don't forget to answer the question of the day, and I'll see you all next time. All right, peace.